Sign the papers tonight, Rachel. I'm done pretending this marriage still means anything. Evan stood on my front porch with a woman beside him I had never seen in person, even though I already knew exactly who she was. She was younger than me, maybe 32, wearing a cream-colored coat and holding a small overnight bag. She kept looking toward my living room like she had already imagined her furniture inside it. I looked at her. Then I looked at my husband. And finally, I looked at our daughter, Lily, who had just come down the stairs. She was 30 years old, still wearing the dark blue sweater she'd worn to work, her keys hanging from one hand. She stopped halfway across the foyer when she saw the woman standing beside her father. Her face changed. Not anger. Not surprise. Something else. Something that made my stomach tighten. "Dad," Lily said quietly. Evan didn't look at her. "Your mother and I need to handle this privately." Lily stared at him for several seconds. Then she said, "You really brought her here?" Evan sighed. "Lily, don't make this harder than it needs to be." She looked at the woman again, then back at him. And suddenly, almost under her breath, she said something that made Evan's expression disappear. "You didn't tell her, did you?" The woman turned toward him. "What didn't you tell me?" Evan went completely still. For the first time since he'd arrived, he looked nervous. I had no idea what Lily meant, but apparently she did. She walked past all of us, went into the small office at the back of the house, and closed the door. Evan stepped toward her. "Lily, don't." She didn't answer. 30 seconds later, she came back carrying an old black folder I'd never seen before. She held it against her chest. Then she looked directly at her father. "Maybe you should sit down." That was when I knew this wasn't about the divorce papers anymore. I just didn't know yet what my daughter had discovered. "My name is Rachel. I'm 30 years old, and until 6 months earlier, I thought I understood exactly what kind of marriage I was living in. Evan and I had been married for 7 years. We weren't one of those couples who screamed at each other every night. There were no broken plates or dramatic scenes. In fact, that was part of the problem. Our marriage had become quiet. Too quiet. Evan worked in commercial real estate. I managed the accounts for a small medical supply company. We had a comfortable home outside Columbus, Ohio. And our daughter Lily had been the center of our family for years. She wasn't Evan's biological daughter. I had raised her mostly on my own before I met him, and Evan had always told me that didn't matter to him. He used to say, "She's my daughter because I chose her." I believed him. That sentence would become one of the things I remembered most painfully. The house we lived in wasn't originally ours either. It had belonged to my grandmother, who left it to my mother. When my mother passed away, the property eventually came to me. Before that happened, though, my grandmother had made one very unusual decision. She created a private family agreement protecting the property from being sold or transferred without my written consent. At the time, I barely understood the legal language. My mother had told me, "Your grandmother wanted to make sure nobody could take this from you just because life changed." I never thought much about it. Evan knew about the arrangement. At least I thought he did. He had signed several documents when we refinanced the house after our wedding, but he never seemed interested in the details. For years he called it our house. I never corrected him. Why would I? We were married. I trusted him. Then, 6 months ago, I found a message on his tablet. It wasn't ambiguous. It wasn't something I could explain away. It was from the woman now standing in my doorway. Her name was Vanessa. The message said, "How much longer are you going to keep pretending you love her?" I remember sitting there for almost 10 minutes without moving. I didn't confront Evan that night. I waited until Lily had gone to bed. Then I asked him one question. "Is there someone else?" He didn't even bother lying. Yes. That single word ended 7 years of trust. But the affair wasn't what scared me most. It was what Evan started asking about the house afterward. He wanted to know how much it was worth, whether I would sell it, whether I could afford another place. And then, one night, he casually said something that I didn't understand at the time. "Vanessa and I need somewhere to start over." I thought he meant somewhere to rent. I was wrong. 3 weeks later, he sent me a message saying his attorney had prepared the divorce papers. And tonight he had come to collect my signature. What he didn't know was that Lily had spent the previous 2 months quietly looking into something I hadn't even realized mattered. And the black folder in her hands contained information that could change everything. Evan had always been good at sounding reasonable when he wanted something unreasonable. That night was no different. He stepped into the living room, loosened his tie, and acted as if he were the exhausted husband coming home to have one final adult conversation. "Rachel, I don't want a scene," he said. "A scene." He had arrived with his girlfriend standing beside him and expected me to make the evening comfortable. Vanessa stayed near the doorway, silent now. Whatever confidence she'd carried onto the porch was gone. Her eyes kept moving between Evan and Lily. Lily placed the black folder on the dining table. "Open it," she said. Evan looked at me. "What's this?" "I don't know," I said. That was the truth. Lily pulled out a chair. "Dad, sit down." He didn't. Instead, he walked toward the folder and opened it himself. The first page was a copy of a property agreement. His eyes moved across it, then stopped. "What is this?" Lily looked at me. "Mom, did Grandma ever explain exactly what she put in place before she died?" I shook my head. "Not really." Evan flipped to the next page. Then the next. His face changed. "Where did you get these?" "I asked for them," Lily said. "From who?" "From your attorney." That got his attention. "You contacted my attorney." "No. I contacted the county records office first. Then I spoke to Mom's original attorney." Evan looked at me. "Rachel, what is she talking about?" "I don't know." Lily pushed a document across the table. "This house isn't marital property in the way you think it is." Evan stared at the page. Then he laughed. Not because it was funny. Because he didn't believe her. "Of course it is. We've lived here for 7 years. Living here doesn't make you the owner." His smile disappeared. Vanessa stepped closer. "Evan." He held up a hand. "Stay out of this." Lily looked at him. "That would have been easier if you hadn't brought her here to take the house." Silence. I felt something cold move through my chest. "Take the house?" "Yes." Lily didn't answer immediately. Instead, she opened another document. Dad filed paperwork last month asking for the house to be considered part of the marital settlement. I looked at Evan. He said nothing. That was my answer. "You were going to make me leave." I whispered. He finally spoke. "Rachel, that's not what this is." "Then what is it?" "We're getting divorced. Things have to be divided." "This house?" "Yes. But it's mine. It became ours when we got married." Lily shook her head. "No, Dad. That's the part you never checked." Evan looked down at the documents again. And suddenly I understood why Lily had been so calm. She hadn't come into the room to argue. She had come prepared. She told us that 2 months earlier, she'd become suspicious after Evan mentioned the house during a conversation with one of his friends. She had asked me if I had copies of Grandma's original documents. I didn't. So Lily went looking. She found the attorney who had handled the estate. Then she found something even more important. A recorded amendment from before my marriage to Evan. My grandmother had specifically protected the property from any future spouse claiming ownership through divorce, separation, or marital contribution. Evan had signed an acknowledgement of that restriction during the refinance. He had apparently forgotten, or never bothered to read it. "You knew about this?" he asked me. "No," he stared at me. "You're telling me you lived here all these years and didn't know?" "I knew Grandma wanted to protect the house. I didn't know the exact legal terms." He looked at Lily. "And you did." "I knew enough to ask questions." Vanessa finally spoke. "Evan, you told me this house was going to be part of the settlement." He closed his eyes. I watched her expression change. That was the first moment I realized she might not have known everything. Evan had built his entire plan around a house he had never actually owned. And now the woman he'd brought into my home was discovering that the future he'd promised her might not exist. But Lily wasn't finished. She opened the final section of the folder. There is something else. Evan looked up. What? Lily placed another document on the table. This is the reason I wanted you here tonight. I looked at the page. It was a bank statement. My name was on it. So was Evan's. But there was another name listed underneath. A company I had never heard of. I frowned. What is that? Lily looked at me. Mom, I think you should sit down. Except Evan didn't. 'Cause he already knew. I could see it in his face. Evan, I said quietly. What is that company? He didn't answer. Lily did. It received money from the house account. My heart stopped. How much? She turned the page toward me. I stared at the number. It was far more money than I had ever imagined. And suddenly the divorce wasn't the biggest problem anymore. Someone had been taking money from me. For years. And my daughter had just found the proof. The room went completely silent. Vanessa stepped backward. Evan! He looked at her. Then at me. Then at Lily. And for the first time that night, my husband looked genuinely afraid. Because he realized something I hadn't. The woman he thought he was replacing had finally stopped being the person who trusted him. And the daughter he had underestimated had been keeping records. For several seconds nobody moved. I kept staring at the bank statement because my mind refused to accept what my eyes were seeing. The company name meant nothing to me, but the account number did. It was connected to the home equity account Evan had insisted we open after our second year of marriage. How much? Asked again. Lily answered quietly. $48,620. I looked at Evan. You took almost $50,000. I didn't take anything. You just said nothing. Because you're misunderstanding what those transfers were. Lily leaned forward. There were 17 of them. Evan's face tightened. Lily, you're 30 years old. You don't understand how business works. No, she said. But I understand bank statements. That sentence landed harder than anything else she'd said. Vanessa looked at him. You told me you were putting money aside for us. I was. From her account. Evan didn't answer. Vanessa's face went pale. I realized then that the affair had never been the whole story. The affair was only the part one had discovered. There had been another layer underneath it. Money. Planning. A future he had been building while quietly dismantling mine. I picked up the documents with shaking hands. What is this company? Lily told me it had been registered 3 years earlier. The listed owner wasn't Evan. It was a man named Robert Hale, one of Evan's former business associates. But the mailing address was familiar. It was the same office building where Evan worked. Why would money from our home account go to his company? Asked. Lily looked at Evan. That's what I wanted to know. He finally sat down. Rachel, listen to me. No, my voice surprised even me. You've had months to explain things. Tonight I'm listening to my daughter. Evan rubbed his forehead. The money was temporary. Temporary. I was going to put it back. Why? He didn't answer. Lily opened another page. Because he was using it to secure a property. I looked at her. What property? The new house. Everything went quiet again. Vanessa slowly turned toward Evan. You told me your down payment was from your bonus. He stared at the floor. She whispered. You lied to me too. I expected to feel satisfaction. I didn't. Felt tired. So tired that for a moment I couldn't even remember what I had been angry about first. Lily placed one more document in front of me. It was an email. From Evan. To Robert Hale. The subject line read, Once Rachel signs. My hands went cold. I read the message. Evan had written that once the divorce was finalized, he expected to receive enough from the house and other marital assets to cover the remaining balance on the new property. He had already planned the next chapter. He had already decided where Vanessa and her son would live. He had already divided my future into numbers on a spreadsheet. And he had done all of it before asking me for my signature. I looked up. You weren't asking me to sign because you wanted this marriage over. He said nothing. You wanted me to sign because you needed my signature to make your plan work. Rachel. No. Answer me. He swallowed. Yes. Vanessa closed her eyes. Lily stood beside me. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like the woman who had been abandoned. I felt like someone who had finally been given the missing pieces. But there was still one thing I didn't understand. Lily, I said, how did you find all of this? She hesitated. Then she looked at her father. Because Dad wasn't as careful as he thought. Evan stood. Enough. No, Lily said. Her voice remained calm. You should have stopped when Mom found out about Vanessa. He stared at her. You don't know what you're talking about. I know you missed 3 payments on Mom's health insurance. My stomach dropped. What? Lily continued. I know you stopped paying the amount you promised for the household expenses. I know you moved money between accounts. And I know you changed the beneficiary information on one of your life insurance policies. Evan looked at her like she had become a stranger. Where did you get that? From the documents you left in your office. You went through my things. I went through the things that affected my mother. He stepped toward her. I stood up immediately. Don't. He stopped. For a moment, I saw the man I had married. Then I remembered the woman beside him. The house. The money. The emails. And I realized I didn't know him anymore. Lily reached into the folder one final time. There is one more thing. Evan shook his head. Lily, don't. She looked at me. This is the original property agreement. It doesn't just protect the house from being claimed by a spouse. She turned the page. It also gives Mom the right to terminate certain financial arrangements if she can prove the property was used without her consent. Evan's face went completely blank. I looked at the bank statements again. Suddenly, the money wasn't just evidence of dishonesty. It could become evidence against him. Evan understood it too. You're bluffing. No, Lily said. I'm not. He looked at me. Rachel, please. It was the first time that night he'd said my name without anger. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Then Vanessa picked up her bag. I need to go. Evan turned. Vanessa. She shook her head. You told me your marriage was basically over. You told me the house was yours. You told me you had everything handled. I do. No, Evan. She looked at me. Then at Lily. I don't think you do. She walked toward the door. Evan didn't follow her. He just stood there. The same man who had arrived hours earlier believing he was about to take control of my life was now watching the future he'd promised another woman disappear in front of him. Lily closed the folder. We should call Gerald tomorrow. He nodded. Tomorrow. That night, after Evan finally left, I sat on the porch alone. The house was quiet. But for the first time in months, the silence didn't feel empty. Felt safe. Then my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Opened it. There was only one sentence. Rachel, you need to know what Evan did before he met Vanessa. I stared at the screen. My hands went cold again. Because suddenly I understood something. The affair wasn't the beginning. It was the middle. And whatever was in that message might be the part of the story my daughter still hadn't found. I didn't open the message immediately. I sat there on the porch with the phone in my hand, staring at that one sentence until the screen went dark. Then it lit up again. Another message. Check the storage unit on Parsons Road. Your name is on the lease. I felt a strange pressure in my chest. I had never rented a storage unit on Parsons Road. But Evan had. I knew because I remembered seeing the monthly charge once, years ago, and asking him about it. He told me it was for old business files. I had believed him. That was the part that hurt most. Not that he had lied. That I had made it so easy for him to lie. The next morning Lily and I met Gerald at his office. I brought the phone. I brought the bank statements. I brought every document Lily had collected. Gerald read everything without interrupting. When he reached the message about the storage unit, he leaned back. Rachel, don't go there alone. I wasn't planning to. Lily looked at me. We'll go together. Gerald nodded. Before you do anything, understand something. If Evan has been using marital funds without your knowledge, we need evidence. Don't confront him. Don't threaten him. Don't tell him what you found. He nodded. For once, I was willing to wait. That afternoon, Lily drove me to Parsons Road. The storage facility was almost empty. We found the unit using the number from the lease. The lock wasn't Evan's. It was new. Lily looked at me. Someone knew we were coming. My heart started pounding. Gerald had told us not to make assumptions. So we didn't. We waited. Then Lily called the facility manager. After a few minutes, he checked the records. The unit had been accessed twice in the previous week. Both times the person had used Evan's identification. Inside were boxes, dozens of them, old financial records, property documents, tax statements, and a folder with my name written across the front. Opened it. The first page made me sit down. It was a copy of a document from before my marriage. My grandmother's property agreement. But this copy had handwritten notes in the margins. Notes made by Evan. He had been studying the agreement for years. He had known. He had known exactly what the house was worth. He had known exactly what protections my grandmother had put in place. And he had known that he couldn't simply take the house from me. So he had been looking for another way. Lily stood beside me. What does the last page say? I turned it over. There was a list. Payments. And beside each payment was one phrase. Settlement strategy. My hands started shaking. Evan hadn't accidentally transferred money. He had been preparing. He had been building a financial plan around taking as much of my property and savings as possible once the marriage ended. The affair had made it easier. Vanessa had been the distraction. The divorce had been the mechanism. And the house had been the prize. I called Gerald. He told us not to touch anything else. By the end of the week, everything was in the hands of attorneys. The story that came out afterward was even worse than I expected. Evan's attorney confirmed that the house couldn't be included in the settlement. The financial records were reviewed. The unauthorized transfers were documented. The missed insurance payments were documented. The money he had moved toward the new property was documented. And the company connected to Robert Hale was investigated. Evan's entire plan began collapsing one piece at a time. He eventually asked to meet me. I almost refused. Then I agreed. Not because I wanted him back. Because I wanted to hear him explain it. We met at a coffee shop on a rainy Thursday morning. He looked older. Tired. Muller. I never meant for things to get this far, he said. I looked at him. You brought another woman to my home. I know. You asked me to sign away my rights. I know. You planned a new house with money you took from our accounts. I was going to put it back. I shook my head. That isn't an explanation. He looked down. For the first time he admitted the truth. He had convinced himself that because he had helped pay bills, contributed to repairs, and lived in the house for years, he deserved a portion of it. When the attorneys told him the property was protected, he panicked. Then he started looking for ways around it. He told himself the money was temporary. He told himself the divorce would settle everything. He told himself I would eventually sign because I was tired. And he thought bringing Vanessa to the house would force me to make a decision faster. I listened. Then I said the only thing I needed him to understand. You didn't lose this marriage because of Vanessa. He looked up. You lost it because you stopped seeing me as a person. He didn't answer. I was your wife when things were difficult. I was the person who kept the house running when you were busy. I was the person who stood beside you when you had nothing. And when you decided you wanted another life, you treated me like paperwork standing between you and it. His eyes filled. I am sorry. Maybe he meant it. Maybe he didn't. It didn't matter anymore. The divorce was finalized several weeks later. The house stayed with me. The financial accounts were separated. The unauthorized transfers became part of the settlement. Evan didn't get the future he'd planned. Vanessa left him before the divorce was finalized. I heard later that she and her son moved to another part of Ohio. I never blamed her. She had been lied to too. Lily stayed with me for a while. One evening we sat on the porch together. "You saved me," I told her. She shook her head. "No, Mum. You saved yourself. I just made sure Dad couldn't hide what he'd done." Smiled. "Where did you learn to be this patient?" She looked toward the yard. "From you." That made me laugh. "That's not true." "It is." She leaned back. "You didn't scream when you found out about Vanessa. You didn't destroy his things. You didn't try to ruin him. You waited until you knew the truth." I looked at the house. The same porch. The same front door. The same place where Evan had once stood and told me to sign the papers and leave. I remembered how small I had felt that night. And then I remembered Lily walking into the room with that black folder. One sentence had changed everything. "You really don't know." Evan didn't know what my grandmother had protected. He didn't know what Lily had discovered. And he didn't know that the woman he thought was too tired to fight had finally stopped fighting blindly. Months later, I replaced the old porch light. The one Evan had complained was too expensive. Lily helped me choose the new one. We stood outside after sunset, watching it shine across the porch. "This looks better," she said. Smiled. Yes. The house was quiet. Not empty. Quiet. There was a difference. I used to think my grandmother had protected this house because she was afraid someone would take it from me. Now I understood. She wasn't protecting the walls. She was protecting my ability to have a place where nobody could tell me I didn't belong. Evan had walked onto that porch believing he owned my future. He left realizing he never owned the house. But that wasn't the real victory. The real victory was that I finally understood something I should have known long before he brought Vanessa to my door. Being betrayed doesn't mean you're powerless. Sometimes the person who thinks they've already won is simply standing on the wrong side of the truth. And sometimes all it takes to turn everything around is one person who notices what everyone else ignored. For me, that person was my daughter. And the sentence that changed my life wasn't something I said to my husband. It was the quiet warning Lily gave him that night. "You really don't know." She was right. He didn't.